Welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to share with you my Fluffal deck profile. This particular deck is really fun. It's a fusion OTK deck with some particular potentials to going first, which is just a pretty awesome in general. And honestly, I don't really have any much more to say that. I think most people know what Fluffal do. But before we jump right into the video itself, I'm going to say two things. The first thing is that I have a new podcast with a friend of mine. If you haven't seen the video of how a Yu-Gi-Oh player guesses how good Pokemon cards are, yes, I'm doing a podcast on the Unfit Crew channel with my friend Dragon Unharm. So if you want to check that, you're more than welcome to, and we'll be more than happy to see you there and enjoying our content. And the second thing, of course, is that I'm using a new mic, so I hope the quality will be better, and let me know in the comments down below if it improves, as well as just giving a like to the video if you enjoyed, and of course, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. But without further ado, let's jump right into the deck list itself. Alright, so jumping into the deck list itself, of course, we're going to start things with our Fluffal monsters. We're going to start with 3 copies of Fluffal Penguin, which is arguably the best Fluffal monster in the entire deck. This particular card is so awesome that when it's used for a fusion summon of a frightful monster and sent to the graveyard, it's basically a destiny draw. But on top of that, the most important effect of this card is that it's allowing you during the main phase to special summon any Fluffal monster out of your hand except another Fluffal Penguin. Not a hard once per turn, by the way, so if you're able to just get it to the graveyard and get it back out again, you're just able to keep special summoning Fluffal monsters, which allowing you to trigger their effects or maybe use them. Very useful card for your plays, very useful for, like, you know, dig deeper into your deck, as well as probably the most searchable Fluffal monster in the entire deck. Next up, for the other 3 of Fluffal Monster, we're running 3 copies of Fluffal Dog. Fluffal Dog is your second best card in the entire deck. Unfortunately, its search effect, one normal special summon, is only for Fluffal Monster and Jimp Sabers specifically, not Eddie and Jimp. Also, to mention the fact that it only happens when it's normal or special summon from the hand. So, this is one of the little bit of, like, I guess, like, a little bit of a dumb things that happen, like, in the early incarnations of Fluffals or early cards of Fluffals, is that they have, like, specifically work around Jim Sabers, and also their effect just only trigger when they basically special summons or normal summons from the hand. So, yeah, I do think it's still a very good card, and it's just a nice Stratos. It just has some weird restrictions. And for the 2 off of the deck, and the only one that we run on 2, we're running 2 copies of Fluffal Bear. This is basically your way to get Toy Vendor for the most part, and it's also just a nice, I'd like to say it, you contribute it and get a polymerization back from your graveyard to your hand. Also, another thing to mention is that I did see builds that run 3 copies of this, which I do understand you want to see this fast and see the Toy Vendor, but on the other hand is that you don't really want to have too many copies of Toy Vendor. Now, I do understand, like, worst case scenario, just a vanilla Fluffal monster, but I do think it's just 2 is more than enough. And then for the one-off Fluffal monsters, we're going to go with all about them together, I guess. We're running 1 copy of Fluffal Dolphin, 1 copy of Fluffal Sheep, 1 copy of Octopus, and 1 copy of Fluffal Wings. We run, or at least I run, 1 of each of these in my deck for particular reasons. Fluffal Wings, you don't really need more than 1. I've seen some builds that like to run this more than 1, which I do understand, because sometimes you just want to draw into it rather than just, you know, Polish burial it or search it, which I do understand, and it works really well with Toy Vendor if you have bad hands, but often than not, running this more than 1 just felt like this card just, like, dead, and you can always just return it back to the deck with the Octopus, or just, like, to the graveyard with the Octopus. So it's really not necessary, in my opinion, to run more than 1, but it could be an argument for running this card more than 1. It's basically a card allowing you to banish it and another Fluffal monster, draw a card, and then destroy Toy Vendor, draw another card, and then when Toy Vendor is sent to the graveyard, you're also able to search on a Jimp Sabers monster or a Fluffal monster from your deck to your hand. So it's basically draw 2, search 1, just in 1 card, which is absolutely excellent. But like I said, it has so many ways, we have so many ways to get into this, so, and you don't always need to see it, so in my opinion, you just only need the 1. As for Fluffal Octopus, this is the card that I mentioned that can return things back from the banished zone to the graveyard. Basically, if you use this card for a fusion summon of a frightful monster into a sent to the graveyard, you're able to return 2 of your banished monsters. And when this card is normal or special summoned, you're able to target 1 Fluffal or a Jimp monster in your graveyard and add it back to your hand, which is a nice recursion card. I really like all the water Fluffal monsters because they were able to just make the deck quite more better in terms of their effects. And speaking of a good water Fluffal monster, we have Fluffal Penguin. Fluffal Dolphin, sorry, that you run 1 copy of because you don't really need more than 1. It's more of like if you have Toy Vendor. If you don't have Toy Vendor, you don't really need this card, and it's also very searchable. This particular card is your Foolish Burial for all of your Fluffal monsters / Egypt Sabers in your deck. Basically, you target a Toy Vendor in your graveyard, set it to your side of the field, and then it's a Foolish Burial, which is absolutely excellent. Also, to mention the fact that if it's used for the fusion summon of a frightful monster and sent to the graveyard, you are able to shuffle back into your deck a fusion or a polymerization spell directly from your graveyard into the deck, which I do wish this also added like a draw one effect, but it's still pretty good sometimes to just get another resource back to your deck, like a polymerization to just make your frightful patchwork or things of that nature live. The only one that is kind of like debatable in this deck, I think, is Fluffal Ship. I like Fluffal Ship. This particular card is actually really good in this deck, in my opinion. I've seen some people like to run third bear, runs around a second dolphin, an owl, or things of that nature. But I like Ship quite a bit because of one thing that Ship does. She's able to get you sometimes this particular thing that is called like unclogging your hand from Egypt Chain, because you're not always going to have the ability to discard it or fusion summon it from the hand, and having the ability to maybe even recur a Fluffal monster to your hand working with Egypt Scythe is also just a very nice as a card, as a one-off. But that does it for the Fluffal monsters. We're running 12 of them. Now for the Egypts. Egypt Chain is the first one. You only use the first effect and not the second one. The second one to attack and then search another copy of itself never comes up. But the effect that you do care about is that if this card basically is sent to the graveyard from the hand or field, you're able to add one frightful card from your deck to your hand. So you do have the ability to add Frightful Patchwork, and that's honestly the biggest reason why this card is absolutely awesome, and it's also been played in Despia branded decks, because it's just not only searching patchworks, which is insane, but it's also just really easy to trigger this card by discarding it or sending it to the graveyard, I guess, which is just super easy. So this card is just absolutely awesome. And then for the other Egypt monsters, we're running one Scythe and one Sabers. Sabers is just a nice card to just like freely special summon out of your graveyard by putting a card from your hand on the top of the deck, which is just nice as a hard ones per turn effect, and also another target to Foolish Barrel to your graveyard if you don't have wings or things of that nature. So having that sometimes just come up, and so it's just a good Egypt card, just to have, you know, just a good name that can recur itself and comes back. An Egypt Scythe is mostly your fusion summon during the opponent's turn to allowing you to achieve the Scythe lock, which I will show it now, with it, a Fluffal monster, and then essentially also having summoning Frightful Cruel, basically. So you basically summon it during the opponent's turn, and that's what's allowing you to do some really cool stuff. But yeah, that does it for the Egypt lineup. Now for the hand trap that I run in the deck, 3 copies of Gamma and the 1 copy of Driver. This could be the Bestial Engine if you have these cards. I just didn't really get them yet. Not to mention the fact that I do like the ability to just like stop my opponent from stopping me. So I do like the Gamma plus Driver. I do think it does come up sometimes. You can also run Lambda in your extra deck, which can make this card always live. But I do think like the one use is more than enough for what you need in the deck. But that does it for the monster lineup. Now we'll move on into the spells. The first and most important spell out of all of them is, of course, Toy Vendor. This particular card is a card that I was so surprised it just became so important after Fusion Enforcers, because this particular card, well, I guess it was before Fusion Enforcers, but more in the new challengers, if you know, during that time. But I guess it like only just became really good in the deck after Fusion Enforcers, because Fusion Enforcers was an absolutely amazing set for this deck, even though we just got like 3 cards. It just helped the deck quite a bit. But regardless, Toy Vendor is your card that allowing you to pitch a card from your hand, and then you draw a card and you show it. And if it's a Fluffal monster, you get to special summon a monster out of your hand. Doesn't really matter which monster, otherwise you send it to the card you drew to the graveyard. Which is, it's an effect that does come up. Sometimes you like to trigger, for example, your Egypt Chain. You don't really care about the fact that you're going to just draw something that is not relevant and discard it. And sometimes actually help you to pop off, so that's a really good effect. But the effect that you actually cared about, which is not a hard once per turn by the way, is that if this card is sent to the graveyard from anywhere, you're able to add an Egypt Sabers or a Fluffal monster from your deck to your hand, which giving you the ability to just continue searching like crazy. Moving on, we're running also 3 copies of Frightful Patchworks. As I mentioned before, this particular card is absolutely insane, allowing you to add an Egypt monster and a polymerization from your deck to your hand. Also seeing a lot of play in the Despia builds / branded, as I mentioned before. And speaking of polymerization, we're running this card at 3. This particular card is just really important, so I thought like running it at 3, although I did see some people running this at 2 for some weird reason in some builds, but I do think in the Fluffal build you just need to run 3, because also Patchwork search this, and it's just, you do want to use this card sometimes in your turns as well going first, so yeah, it's a very important card. Moving on, for the 2-ops of the deck, I'm running 2 copies of Fluffal, or should I say Royal Penguin's Garden. I guess it's another 2 copies of Fluffal Penguin, as well as 2 copies of Foolish Burial Goods. Now, probably some people are going to say me, what the hell are you only running 2 copies of Foolish Burial Goods? Well, I couldn't really fit the 3rd one, but I do think 2 is more than enough, because sometimes you just join to multiple copies of this and just do absolutely nothing. Basically, this is just your way to send Toy Vendor to the graveyard, get a search, and also on top of that, maybe trigger your, like, you know, Dolphin effect. This is like the main way to get Dolphin, because you just like send Toy Vendor to the graveyard, Toy Vendor search Dolphin, Dolphin normal summon or special summon if you have a Penguin before, and then you just use Dolphin to set the Toy Vendor and then send to the graveyard the so-called wings. So that is pretty much the main use of this card. As for Royal Penguin Garden, this is on activation. You're able to add a Penguin monster, and wouldn't you guess it, Fluffal Penguin is a Penguin monster, I guess. So yeah, this search this card, which is really, really good. On top of that, it's also have the other nice effect, which is giving you the ability to basically decrease the level of a Penguin monster in your hand or face up on the field by 1 until the end of the turn. And this, then you get to discard, and then you discard a card, which is nice again to trigger some of your effects or get cards that you want to the graveyard. Not to mention the fact that you don't always need Fluffal Penguin as a level 4, especially if it's in your hand and you use it for a fusion spell. Like, let's say you open up with a Fluffal Penguin and then you open up, like, you open up with this, you activate it, you then search a Fluffal Penguin, and you also have a Jib chain in your hand. You can activate this effect, send the Jib chain, get to search the Patchwork, activate Patchwork, search another Jib monster and a polymerization spell, and there you go, you got yourself a fusion summon just out of 1 card, which that's why I like Royal Garden that much. Then for the rest of the cards, we have 1 copy of Frightful Fusion, 1 copy of Frightful Repair. This is basically a card that you search with your Jib chain if you haven't searched Patchwork yet or you didn't get Patchwork. And this one is the target that you send to the graveyard with Cruel Well to just be a nice special summon out of the hand. And then for the last card that we're running in the spell lineup, we're running 3 copies of Dark Ruler No More, which should be probably droplets because it doesn't prevent you from OTK to using the droplets. But I couldn't, like, I didn't really get my copies of droplets yet that I ordered for some reason. It's taking a little bit longer than I expected. But for now, just Dark Ruler No More is not really the worst option to run. You can also just run any other board breaking card that you feel that works for your deck. But that does it for the main deck. Now we'll move on into the extra deck. And for the extra deck, we're running 2 copies of Cruel Well, 1 copy of Frightful Sabertooth, 1 copy of Frightful Kraken, and 1 copy of Frightful Tiger. I think this is a very, very, very nice lineup where it comes to your Frightful monsters. Cruel Well is actually very, very important. You sometimes summon it during your turn, going first, and then you also need the second one for your Scythe lock, so that's why you want to run 2 copies of this card. This card is also just great to sending your Frightful cards from the deck or extra deck to the graveyard to then just boost its attack, which is very, very great. And also, how should I mention this, is like the reason why this card is good is that it's pop a card for you and a card for the opponent. So the card you're going to pop is a Scythe, and then when they have a monster, you pop it or any card, and then you just trigger the Scythe, which that's how the lock works. As for these, Tiger is just a nice for, like, you know, clearing the board. Kraken is just a great card in general. Sabertooth is just, if you're able to summon it by using one of these without banishing them, you just get them back, which is really good. And one of the combos that is used to know is that you're using Kraken to summon the Sabertooth after you send the card to the graveyard, and then you bring out the Kraken again, and it's also send another card to the graveyard, which is really nice. Also, these 2 are nice boosters, which giving you the ability to sometimes OTK quite in a better way. And then for the Xyz lineup, we're running 4 of these. We're running 1 copy of Totally Awesome, 1 copy of Abyss Dweller, 1 copy of Tornado Dragon, and 1 copy of Bahamut Shark. This is the lineup that I decided to go with. Totally Awesome and Bahamut Shark are just working really well together. I'm really, really surprised that this card didn't get hit on the latest ban list, but I'm also super happy that it's still here because, well, we can use Penguin plus dolphin, and you just make this, and then you make this, and you have yourself an Omni Negate that's supposed to protect you from Nibiru. As for Abyss Dweller, it's just a great rank 4 that is very, very good in the format. And Tornado Dragon, if you're not able to get Artifact, or should I say not Artifact Scythe, but Edgem Scythe, you have another way to just pop your own back row during the opponent's turn, and then get the lock going, so you can actually stop your opponent from playing the cards from the extra deck. And for the last few cards that we have the Link Monsters with 1 copy of Cross Sheep, 1 copy of IP Masquerena, 1 Dagda, 1 Appaloosa, 1 Boros Sword, and 1 copy of Underworld Goddess. This is the lineup that I decided to go with. Underworld Goddess probably the most debatable card, but it's also just a great card to just like lock graveyard effects in some way. So I do really, really like this as a one-off. Boros Sword is giving you another OTK potential, although it should be access code, and then I might actually just chain cards around here to just make the access code bigger. But the point is, it could be access code, it could be this, it's really depending on you. Appaloosa is for going first, interruptions. Dagda is to get Scythe if you don't draw it or see it. And of course, IP Masquerena is to go into this or this during your opponent's turn, which giving you some particular protection on top of that. As for the last card, Cross Sheep, probably the most important card in the extra deck where it comes to the Link Monsters, because this card is just if you summon a fusion monster to one of its arrows, it's basically going to revive a level 4 or lower lower monster from your graveyard to your side of the field, which can again revive, for example, another copy of Penguin, which can again get a card out of your hand, which is very, very good. But that does it for the, well, Link Monsters, and does it for the deck in general. So hope you enjoyed, hope you, well, I guess learned something new, although I don't think Fluffal just really changed as an overall thing. I do think it's just a really fun deck just sometimes to go back into. I might do the branded variation in the future, but for now, I just hope you enjoyed this pure one, which I just have really fun time making. But with that out of the way, now let's move on into the next deck choices. All right, so moving on into the next deck choices, of course, we have the 3 returning options from last week, which are Salamand Greats, I believe Unchained, and the last one is Speedroids. And the fourth one I'm going to throw out there again because I want to do it once more is Super Quantum, because it's been a while and I honestly just want to update these guys because I think the Super Quantum slash Power Ranger version of Yu-Gi-Oh is just really cool. So yeah, that's pretty much does it for the video. Hope you enjoyed, hope you learned something new, or just in general just enjoy the update. I'll see you next time, guys. Bye bye. Efficient is sufficient. Let's see how this one goes.